Well, hey there, and welcome to episode number 497 of 6 Pixels of Separation, the Mirum Podcast. My name is Mitch Joel. It's January the 17th, 2016. Let's get on with the show. So, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Joseph Jaffe, and I am fresh off the floor from Vegas. I'm what we call a showgirl, showrunner, showboy,
Booth babe.
booth babe, something like
Booth
that.
babe, yeah.
How are you, Mitch?
I'm good. Welcome to episode number 36 of Across the Sound 2.0. We've done 36 of these, Joe.
Happy 2016.
Happy
Happy New Year.
2016. Happy New Year. Welcome back from the craziness, I think, that is the Consumer Electronics Show. So you went out this year. I didn't, and yet I still get calls to do some sort of media punditry on it. And it is funny. You sort of sit somewhat removed from this event, just watching the news feeds go. And I don't know, for me, and I'd love your perspective because you're sort of on the floor feeling it. I always feel that when CES comes around, there's these sort of duality moments happening. One is there's some sort of validation of a lot of the things we've been talking about, writing about, podcasting about, and seeing in the sort of this is coming, and is there a moment of fruition of it happening at CES with a real sort of plausible product or service. And the other side of it is, are we seeing a lot of things being announced and spoken about that really won't come to be or have any sort of real commercial reality in whatever year is happening for CES, in this case as it rolls into 2016. Am I crazy for looking at it from that perspective, Joe?
Look, I want to take a step back and talk about a CES maybe, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5, 6, 7. It was a CES in the past 10 years, and I was invited by Kodak. Maybe you've heard of them. I was invited by a company called Kodak to sit on a panel. They were having a whole series of thought leadership panels throughout the day at their booth. And I went and I had to get makeup and kind of retouched, I guess, and get my hair sorted out. And it was very professional, green room, etc. Got ushered onto the stage and discussed whatever it is that I discussed. Maybe I predicted that next year there wouldn't be a Kodak booth or even a Kodak. And so that was the year that funnily enough, Polaroid was getting a lot of play because Lady Gaga made an appearance about a new kind of endorsement, etc. deal that she was doing, I think, with Jay-Z at the time. It was very confusing. But here we have CES in 2016. And in a way, CES has come back from the death where I think Kodak didn't. CES is not the CES from 10 years ago. It's not about or only about Sharp and Samsung and Sony and Panasonic and the big TV manufacturers or TV brands anymore. In many respects, I think, and I don't have this on record, but I'm sure people listening would be able to back me up on this. Numbers, I think, either plateaued or were stagnating. And this year, it was completely different. I mean, from the time sitting at JFK, delayed by 3 hours, on a sold-out flight, everyone was going to CES. Well, certainly on the flight. We arrive at the airport, and the line to get a taxi was, some people waited 2 hours to get a taxi, and I just felt, and with full disclosure, I mean, it's ironic that you didn't even go to CES, and you're, on the radio and being called for a point of view on what you thought was so hot at CES. I didn't even make it to the floor. I didn't even make it to the convention center. I pretty much walked between the Bellagio, the Aria and the Cosmopolitan, took meeting after meeting after meeting, went to event after event, networking after networking, drinks after drinks, spoke at an ANA event at C Space, which I guess is
You
the
got to slow down.
agency.
ANA, not an ANA, not an AA event.
No, well, I mean,
After the drinks, you could have
I
a couple
checked
meetings.
myself into AA afterwards because I drank so much. But you know, didn't even make it there in many instances. So for me, you know, it prompted many of the trades. I think Ad Age actually wrote a piece and said that kind of, you know, CS is the second Can in a way, where all of the PNGers, you know, ascend or descend in their flock, their mob, their posse, you know, and they make an event of it, not just in terms of being there and getting a company like MediaLink or their agency to take them on a whole tour and do that kind of stuff, but also hold strategy meetings and vendor meetings and suite meetings with the Facebooks and the Googles and the Twitters. But that's the new CS. It's not really the consumer it's one of those things where, like, you know, Kentucky Fried Chicken changes its name to KFC, and at some point people don't even know what it stood for. I'm not sure that this is about consumer electronics at all anymore, and just more about kind of this, you know, kind of digital and rise of technology that is pervasive now in our lives across every single aspect, including objects, including refrigerators, including cars, which prompts the whole kind of connected home and connected everything and wearables and Internet of Things and big data. But without going down that route, for me, I felt very energized coming back, I felt brain dead, but I felt very energized going there, being a part of it, walking down. You could be walking down any, you know, lobby aisle, you know, going to the toilet. You're going to bump into someone that you know. And in some cases, they were old friends and familiar faces, and really, really great to connect with people from blasts from the past. And in other cases, you know, you would get into this punch-drunk type of frame of mind where you would just start talking or make conversation with anyone. And turns out that they were probably someone very interesting and someone that you were glad that you took the time to friend or to just kind of, you know, make small talk with, even at the poker table. So, you know, and amidst all of that, if you asked me what was one booth or one product that I saw, I'd be lying if I told you anything, because I saw nothing. I saw nothing, and yet I experienced everything.
So good, because now it's like it's almost like the blind leading the blind in this conversation, because you become a victim of the feed in the conversation versus the sort of actuality of having seen the latest 95-inch 4K TV, whatever it might be. But you said energized. Take me through the sort of one theme component of it that energized you. But before you do, I'll give you a chance to think about it. For me, when I look at what was making it to the top of the feeds, and I was obviously following people who were very intimately sharing content, text, images, audio, video through the social channels for sure, I felt a certain physicality of technology that I feel went away and sort of came back. Went away, obviously, in the internet era a little bit in the 90s and stuff, when it all became about the web browser and high speed and et cetera, et cetera. And that moment obviously took away from the TVs and the sort of physical consumer electronic devices that were, you know, very much a part of the pedigree of and the history of that amazing event. And if I fast forward to every year, yes, how big is the latest TV? How thin is it? How light is it? For sure, that seems to be a general theme. But I felt there was a real physicality to the web technology. You mentioned this sort of connected home, wearables, cars. That, I mean, and I could go on. But to me, it felt like this stuff is more than really happening. It is. And that was, for me, the big sign of, wow, things really have shifted in a short period of time. What energized you the most, though?
Oh, I love what you said about the physicality of tech. And by the way, I think there's even though you spoke about the blind leading the blind, you know, without getting too sticky. I mean, one of the big thing in terms of driverless cars and a lot of the technology that did come out around the automotive space absolutely is going to help the blind drive and get from point A to point B. So even even quite literally, there is something there. But the perspective of me being there but not on the floor, but you not even being in Vegas, I think brings something to the table too in terms of not being in the minutia and the madness of it all. But whereas you spoke about the physicality of technology, I would talk about the pervasiveness of technology, not just physical but everywhere, because it's the you feel the data, you feel the intangible as well. It's the tangible and the intangible, and it's really just everywhere, in a sense, rather than just be able to say, okay, Withings happened to come out with its new thermometer, its connected thermometer to add to its blood pressure and its scale. I have the scale at home, etc. I just happen to know because I got an email about it as well. And complete, tangent for a second, still kind of amazed at how poorly companies do to reach out to people in advance to say, come out to this, be a part of that. Would you like a sample?
Listen, pitching,
oh my God, it's still
the pitching
so little.
world is so bad. I mean, it's funny because I'm heading out to Los Angeles at the end of this month to attend the NAMM show, which is the largest get-together of musicians for instruments and stuff like that. With my No Trouble podcast stuff that I'm doing, I thought it'd be sort of like a childhood dream to go to this candy store with all the musicians playing all the booths and walking around seeing what the gear is. And I just thought, being on the media side of it, because that's how I got invited, that it would be, I'm going back to the 80s here with these terrible press releases and just, completely, it's mind-blowing how we could be that savvy and have this much data and be in this place where the pitches are so bad. Let's save bad pitches, though, for another event.
Yeah, but let me go back to it for a second. The thing that really got my attention, and I incorporated it into I gave 2 presentations while I was out there. At Evolution, we have this what if slide, and we always started off with, what if Kodak acquired Instagram? Might they have survived? Might they have thrived? That's literally, when I launched the company, when I co-founded the company 4 years ago, that was the first thing we said, the big what if slide, and we've evolved it since. The next one is, what if Blockbuster had invested in Netflix when they had the opportunity to, because they did. And the third one is, what if Ford and Uber had created some kind of a strategic partnership where every, UberX is a Ford Fiesta or a new Ford product that you could sample, if you will, or try before you buy. Why I bring those up? Because this is 4 years ago, right? First of all, we started this podcast talking about Kodak. Second of all, Netflix had a huge presence at CES and made a few significant announcements. And just by the way, a few days after CES is the Golden Globes, where the Amazons and the Netflixes of the world are winning the Golden Globes. And as Ricky Gervais said in his opening remarks, NBC is the perfect network to be hosting the Golden Globes because they're so impartial. And why are they impartial? Because they don't have one show nominated. Not even one show nominated. And then the third one, Ford and Uber. Well, the reality is Ford is less likely to buy Uber than Uber is to buy Ford, but at literally the same week. And this is my point. We saw GM announce a $500 million deal with Lyft. So you're seeing, this kind of slide coming to life, but you're actually seeing, this kind of the real pervasiveness and the common thread in terms of CES, living, breathing CES. Big brands, and I won't say working with small startups because none of them are small, but certainly kind of, investing, building, acquiring, and aligning with key digital players. And that to me is the kind of common theme or common thread.
It also used to be that we would hear things on the CES floor that would feel very much like we're going to step into the future a little bit, and the future is going to come faster than you might suspect. I think about that sort of, the sort of hokey plays you see in the media where it's like, also featured at CES is this drone that can fly people in it, or whatever it might be. Actually, there was one of those. The one that caught my attention that made me laugh and smile, because it's something when I do my presentations I talk about, is I think it was Samsung that announced this fridge that had a very large screen on it, connected device that included a camera that allowed you to see inside the fridge without having to open it, and obviously through your app you could see what's inside your fridge as well, and you can move the camera around almost like there's a drop cam inside the fridge, which is probably that or GoPro, something like that. And when I speak, I always say, 5 years ago, if you would have said to somebody, we're going to connect your fridge to the internet, they would have said like, why? What's the point? That's so stupid. What a waste. Now we all walk home every day and we're like, why isn't my fridge connected to the internet? Because it's plugged in, and that ability to be connected is not only cheap and pervasive and ubiquitous, but there's almost this expectant thing that it should be connected and give us access whenever we want it or want to have access to it. Again, if you would have gone back a couple of years, I would have said, well, it's interesting, but people don't want that. For many years there was this piece of data that always came out that said all of these smart TVs are in market, and yet this tiny percentage of them are actually connected to the internet. Obviously, that's changed dramatically, and now we even have people with older TVs that aren't connected are doing the whole Chromecast for $35 or Apple TV or whatever it might be to connect these quote unquote dumb devices. They're not smart because they're not connected to each other or the internet to be. Now again, if you go back and think, well, connected fridge, long big screen, and a camera that's so hokey and like I can't see that in market, versus I felt that the coverage of these things that we might have perceived to be silly was actually the opposite, where people were like, yeah, that actually makes sense. How soon is that coming here? Is that something that's sort of going to be very, very expensive out of the gates, or is it affordable right now? Put that aside with the sort of drone that can carry a human being, and fine. But I did feel like a lot of that sort of physical technology very much felt almost like it's already either been in market or it should be in market, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely kind of torn between, mocking the smart fridge and being completely critical versus kind of absolutely, agreeing with the point of view, which is, but haven't we been talking about that for 5 years in a sense? I think to kind of give you a perspective, and this is something that I've thought about and really introspected, about quite extensively. So in the crayon days, we used to work with Panasonic, and so I was kind of quite familiar with a lot of the kind of consumer electronics space, and I remember going. It was the size of the screen was the big thing for a long time, and then it became 3D TVs. Remember those? And then last year or the year before, the curved TV.
Yeah.
Now I can tell. I could have told you. The 3D TV was intriguing. It actually looked amazing. Never caught on for a variety of reasons. Too expensive. There was no programming. The curved TV, at that point, I'm like, seriously, guys, like, when are you just going to pack it up and go home? And I think the thing is, these companies there has to be something. They can't they can't be on stage and not have anything new, the big thing.
It's like Wall Street. These companies have to come out and be better, thinner, cheaper, faster. And it's Wall Street.
And it's none of them, though. It's not better or cheaper, or maybe it's faster, because that's
thinner, lighter.
Yeah. Well, thinner and lighter, and Moore's law in effect. But I think what I realize now, trying not to be too cynical about it, in order to stay on the floor, in order to be an anchor or a bellwether, they need to have a point of view, these companies. The sad thing is that they spend, I don't even want to guess, how many hundreds of millions of dollars in production and R&D and research and development and marketing and merchandising to come out with these, quite frankly, white elephants that are eyesores. They're not outliers. They're absolutely eyesores. They're kind of a little embarrassing, and which brings me back to kind of the smart fridge. I'm just, I went and I looked at all, do we really need, you know what impresses me? What impresses me is my Breville toaster. Why? Because it's got two functionalities that I think are sublime. One is it's got a button that's called lift and look, right? Or look and see, I think. You press it, it comes up the toast and it goes right down. So you can just get a little bit of a peek, make sure that it's okay. And then there's a button that just says a little bit longer. Just the little bit longer button.
God, we're talking about toasters, Jack.
What a brilliant idea! Because how many times have we burnt the toast by putting it back again? Or I have a GE grill outside, and one of their monochrome grills, and it has a light inside. Like a light. I mean, you don't need the connected grill that tells you exactly, if the, I don't know, if you maybe,
Well, it ties in. It might be good. It might be good to know how hot the actual it is and how much longer to cook the steak, but go on.
Right. Well, just a simple light to make grilling at night a little bit easier. I guess my point is that old classic line that you and I have been using for well over a decade. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Right? Right?
Yeah, totally. And one area that I want to move towards, because it's easy to get caught up in appliances, and all of these things are sort of like what I call furniture that like speaks to you in some way or another, is some of the themes that I think emerged that do point a little bit to a sort of definite path of where we're going. And, we'll jokingly talk about what year is the year of mobile or what year is the year of the tablet or smartphone. But I really do think that one of the things I captured from the world that I think really affects the marketers that you and I deal with on a day-to-day basis is this idea that mobile is no longer a scaled-down version of the web. And if I go further with that, and it's an obvious one because we've been saying it for a long time, but it's not the reality. If you look at things like Facebook and YouTube and others, these are still web-developed initiatives. And when you go to these mobile versions, they are this sort of scaled-down web. However, if you see where the world is at today and the excitement that marketers have over digital channels, Snapchat, Instagram, even Pinterest, a little bit is sort of more there. The mobile is the real experience and where the action is, and the web is nothing if somewhat just a transactional thing to make sure to go and get the mobile experience. I really do feel after what was explored and talked about and put into the media from CES that we're going to see a dramatic shift, not in just the Facebooks and YouTubes of making that not even a transition, but almost like a complete new product that is mobile first, for lack of a better word. I really felt like this is going to be, or this moment was a bit of a wake-up call to businesses that the stuff you have in market can no longer be just a responsive website, or you need to have a mobile app with your web and your e-commerce and your social, but rather what are you going to do now when this is the thing? Because there was not talk about browsers and personal computers. And in fact, there was even talk about the slowing down of sales on tablets. So what we're really talking about are these things that are in our pockets. I actually felt finally, not that, this is the year of mobile, I would never say that, but I really did feel like there was a sort of shuddering of the shoulders, like someone was grabbing these brands by the shoulders and shaking them and going, the things that you have in market are just inadequate now. We see this at CES. We're seeing not only just even this sort of the appliances and furniture and what they can do, but how you interact with them, these smart devices. And I'm thinking for sure right now about things like Sonos and how the mobile device is really that remote control for the experience, that this has to shake brands at their very core. If this didn't wake them up, I don't know what will.
Yeah, I mean, I think the phrase vertical video was mentioned, in the Ad Age kind of synopsis. And
well, first define it, Joe, because a lot of people might not be clear as to what vertical videos define it. Or if you want me to, I can, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you know what the funny thing is, I looked at it and I was like, vertical video, what is that? And so I guess the definition of it, because it was kind of like a little new to me too, is really recognizing that your screen at home is essentially, your television screen is horizontal video. The mobile phone and how video is now being consumed and even created is in a vertical environment. It is your mobile phone, and it's being able to optimize and produce and ultimately consume in a vertical environment, but also recognizing the turning of the screen, is part of that consumption experience as well. So,
right, primary consumption of video is now happening at a vertical format versus the horizontal format. And the jokes and memes that you see on Facebook about like turn your phone this way to record because that's the way the world watches is actually not true. And if you look at consumption of video, and I think it is being driven by platforms like Snapchat for sure and Instagram, that this sort of like you normally see vertical video with the black bars on the side, that will go away. And that is the primary way a lot of us are going to look at video. And as that becomes more and more pervasive, which they're saying that was one of the big things at CES, that actually sort of switching your phone on its side, as we do now with YouTube, again, web-based and old school TV-like in terms of how it was created, will go away. I can tell you that I've even seen very creative types directing movies specifically in vertical format, and some of this stuff is absolutely spectacular. So it's not like you're losing something by it not being horizontal or it's getting cut when it's vertical. We're talking about production and delivery of content that doesn't make the consumer have to tilt it sideways to get the full experience. And that, I think it's huge.
I'm smiling because you're like, hey, Joe, why don't you talk about it and then I will. And then you're like launched into your definition. But yeah, I mean, it's and what the article actually says, just to add to that, is that in many cases, what you even have is the exhibitors and people communicating to attendees at these events now with screens, but the screens themselves are now being turned on their side.
Yeah.
So rather than create these big walls that are horizontal in nature, what you're seeing now are ones that are vertical, and recognizing that people are, it's kind of interesting, even from a behavioral standpoint, that we're reading now top to bottom, as opposed to left to right, or it's a different kind of navigation, and it's how we expect to scroll and how we expect to consume and where we expect the next piece of information to be. So I think that, everything you're saying about mobile, the pervasiveness of mobile, the remote control, the hardware, software, the formula in a sense. I think it's less. It's even less about the connected hardware. It's more about the accompanying software. That's really the issue. And so the mobile phone.
Well, it's also habits,
the remote,
right?
The Bluetooth, it's everything. I mean, what isn't it?
Well, think about things like how we just go through from, let's say, flicking through your Facebook feed as it is now in that very vertical way. It's not as much fun as sort of tipping the phone to the side. But now I'm thinking about, like, to me, the big thing is I'm always like, okay, that's great. It's consumers, and all those kids are going crazy with their Snapchatting and all that stuff, which I know makes people like Gary Vaynerchuk crazy because the numbers are well beyond just the teens at this point. But I look at that and I think of things like, what's the number one company of the year this year? Inc. magazine would have said that it was Slack. And that sort of messaging, which I think is another area that's super fascinating, and how it's that vertical experience from, again, images and video that's being more and more pervasive in the office. In the office, we have functioning, amazingly powerful research companies like IDC saying that as of even a year and a half ago, that PCs have been relegated to an accessory device, to mobile. So now we're going to start seeing, even in the workplace, with more and more people not needing PCs or even tablets, but moving towards smartphones for all of their work, that sort of vertical experience is going to get more and more important. Again, it's somewhat early days. We laugh because we've been talking about it a long time, but this is the moment where these devices, and again, these applications that reside on mobile as their gateway, are way more powerful. There are people who talk about Slack and who use Slack in a way in which they say it's almost like when we had Twitter, and Twitter was like, let's say, email, and we started using something like a Hootsuite, and it was like suddenly that little peephole of what you had opened up across all of these amazing tabs and search functionalities. That Slack is the same way that people feel about Slack in comparison to email, like that sort of opening up of this pinhole where suddenly you have horizontal perspective and lateral perspective that you just couldn't have before. And I look at that and I go, so it's not just about the fact that we've got, vertical video or mobile is no longer a scaled down version of the web, but rather this is becoming the primary tool that we're using in work as well. And again, you have to look at this from the consumer side and the business side. And I do think that it's bigger than most people want to admit. We want to dismiss it. It's mobile, but it's not that. This is like a big shift in how people operate with one another.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't really have too much to add to that. It's it except for the fact that I don't think ever in our I know we've probably said this many times, but I'm not sure that ever in this business we've seen something as dominant and pervasive on every single level as this mobile phone.
Yeah.
And so in some respects, and it's funny because we're not really. There was an announcement, and I can't remember where I saw it. I think maybe Shelley Palmer may have covered it, which is the next generation type of phone.
It's always great. Well worth checking out Shelley Palmer if you don't follow her. This stuff is great.
I think Shelley spoke about kind of 10. In fact, one of those was probably the drone that can actually go out to sea to rescue someone and has place for someone to sit, and right. It's still unmanned. Brilliant, amazing, and talk about the value and the lives that it will save. But it's funny because I'm thinking about it now, Mitch, and we should be talking about the curved phone and the 3D phone and the Oculus Rift enabled phone. I mean, we should be talking about the phone should be the focal point, and we should be talking about the bigger, better, lighter, thinner, faster, cheaper phones, not television screens. And I think
we sort of are. Like the thing about Google Cardboard is you slide this thing into that device that turns the phone into that. And I think that the whole idea of curved screens is obviously getting us to a place not where screens are curved, but where screens are flexible and can be rolled up almost like a sheet of paper. So again, we're a bit heading into the Moore's Law world of a bit of. I want to sort of take a step back because I actually think that there's a conversation that I'd love to have towards the end about the 1, 2, or 3 things that have been hyped that actually fell flat this year, and I've got a couple of them, and we're almost traipsing into that area a little bit. But where I want to go from the extension of this vertical video and mobile is into this idea of messaging, because I feel like messaging also became this sort of undercurrent conversation that came out of CES. And again, we're moving away from the physical and appliances, but more into the software world. I'm thinking, of course, of things like Facebook Messenger. Facebook owns WhatsApp, bought them for $25 billion. We talked a little bit about Slack. Even this week, the guys who one of the guys who co-founded Vine or found Vine launched this thing called Peach. We've seen the reports that came out during CES that private messaging apps have now overtaken social media in terms of size and growth and capabilities. I don't think you and I would deny the power of these apps. The fact that these apps are very, very soon going to have, and some of them do. If you look at what's the big one in Asia, it'll come to me as I'm talking. But like in those apps, you can actually order your Uber or order from Amazon or have all this sort of customer service functionality as if you were chatting with a friend. This is, to me, another story that was emerging out of CES. This sort of the future of what we do in digital may be very, very private suddenly, and the conversations that brands have with customers may happen on messaging platforms and not necessarily be part of that permanent archive or Googleable, or I'm going to post to Facebook and use my 20,000 followers as some sort of hostages to get what I need out of you. Was that conversation something you were hearing in the hallways as well? I mean, even Snapchat's a big part of that sort of private messaging platform as well.
Well, I'll tell you what it does make me think of, and it's something that's concerning, and it concerns everyone, which is when we, this definitely was clearly a common theme, as it should be, which is we think of security and we think of privacy. But also, we live in a world now where, a lot of these, from a global terror standpoint, a lot of these cells and groups are communicating using, encrypted and almost unhackable private messaging platforms. And in some respects, they are apps. And in other respects, they're using, unsuspecting messaging environments, which is the messaging environments, in gaming, and whether it's through Xbox or PlayStation.
This was early days. I remember Christopher S. Penn used to talk about how he felt a lot of this was happening in places like World of Warcraft, where they would even leave literal documents for each other that were just sitting there for people to grab. But go on.
So I'm just saying. So that component, um, I mean, I almost feel like we need a dedicated episode of our show, of our chat, to talk about messaging. Maybe we have already, but this idea of and we've probably discussed how our kids, well, maybe not yours yet, but teenagers, use Instagram as a messaging platform,
Sure.
or as
Yeah.
and so at any given point in time, the photos themselves are disposable, the comments are not. And so what will happen is when they want when they're sick and tired of the comments on their permanent record, they'll just delete the photo.
But
But the
Snapchat
photo,
became an evolution of that as well, right? You do have people who like respond to things on Snapchat with like an exclamation on the picture, or they just send like a quick little picture, sort of facial expression. You're seeing messaging that isn't even text-based happening in the platforms that,
well,
again,
it's a standard photo.
yeah.
It's just stick your tongue out and then talk about your concerns about the China stock market, and the fact that Apple's reduced their forecasts in iPhone production, but pretty much that is mapped against you sticking your tongue out. So if someone can explain the tongue sticking, the stuck out tongue, that please contact me offline. But I mean, it's
Snapchat you.
yeah, but yeah, exactly. But the messaging, I don't know that I saw, just looking at different recaps and different reviews, etc., that messaging was a common thread or common theme at all. But to me, it just, again, it makes me think of look at Ford, right? A company that has been pretty prolific and pretty progressive, and credit where credit's due in terms of leading the charge of the connected car, the self-drive, well, not the self-driving car, but certainly the self-parking car, and now several other aspects of that functionality. I think maybe, and this is almost, I'm throwing it out there, thinking out loud, that we're getting much better as a public, as a consumer base, as a professional base, of being able to, sort the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
In terms of being able to say, the refrigerator that will alert you when the door is open, or you can just shut the damn door. Because unless the door opened by itself, someone's getting grounded if they forgot to close the fridge door. And the temperature, changing the temperature, I'm sorry, but that is really not a pain point that I feel, 62% of the world, or more than 50% of the world, critical mass has at the moment. So I think what we're doing is almost, it's interesting looking at, when we look at the winners and losers. And so I'm excited to get into the, you come up with the hype or the products that failed to live up to the hype, and I'll comment on them. But, for me, I'm definitely, whereas in the early days, the whole Oculus Rift was interesting and intriguing to me. Now that they're starting to kind of develop integration into Xbox consoles and games, well, that's pretty damn cool. And making it consumer ready, that to me is an evolution of the idea and of the technology. And by the way, we will see the same with refrigerators, because the big promise of refrigerators was meant to be, but again, I just don't know that the pain point is there. The milk is, below 10% volume, immediately the order is placed,
Restock.
and Fresh Direct or whatever, Peapod delivers it. But I just, what? I mean, I'm just not sure that the pain point is there. And so that point of view will be the refrigerator right now, because we're seeing, Fitbit came out with, Fitbit is just powering ahead, the big winners in that wearable space. I just got a Garmin band for my birthday. That to me is a much more maturing or interesting space, the battle for the wrist. That's a conversation I'd rather have than, the connected refrigerator, under the context or in the context of the
And of
connected.
course, it's mostly because wearables have had more legacy. Wearables have matured, as you said, a lot. The wearables are at a price point now that has allowed them and enabled them to reach the mass market. And there's been players before them, from Nike to Up, which I think is stumbling a little bit in this market, unfortunately, because they were such a power player, to obviously the Apple Watch and components like that. One area, so if messaging wasn't a theme you picked up on, but I did on my feed, I'm curious about streaming. It feels to me like, again, we're talking about all of this technology, but of course it's all about the content that's going to be on there. It feels to me like there has been this massive embrace in the past year and a half, 2 years, of consumers to pay for access to content over ownership of it, downloading it, having the physical goods, and that obviously streaming engenders things like time shifting and binging and obviously commercial skipping, which isn't great for our industry, which were sort of pillars of what was making DVRs and PVRs and TV at the cable level so much more fascinating. But these sort of over the top OTT, as or whatever they're called, these devices and platforms, it feels like are real. And obviously the Netflix numbers are there, and we know the Spotify numbers are there. Apple Music numbers are looking really good, 10 million subscribers. Obviously Google Play, Hulu. There's a bunch of people who are at this, and even if you wanted to go into streaming and think about things like Twitch even, and again, we could go back to vertical video on that world as well, but it feels to me like streaming is serious business, right? Netflix everywhere announced, Reed Hastings talked about 100 plus countries that have now come online for Netflix just at CES. That really, I mean, you're the guy who wrote Life After the 30-Second Spot. Streaming, this is going to be the thing that's going to bring some form of convergence to the stuff we watch.
There's absolutely no question, and the industry, that certainly was kicking and screaming along the way, the whole television and movie business. Even again watching the Golden Globes from Sunday, the January 10th, depending on when you listen to this, as opposed to saying yesterday, which I just did. Talking about this was an exciting year for storytelling or content on film, television, and digital platforms. So now it's one of the three pillars now. They've called it digital platforms, referring to predominantly, clearly, Netflix and Amazon Prime. But it still blows me away, and it hasn't worn off or grown old on me when you're seeing movie stars and film stars thanking Jeff Bezos. It just seems kind of crazy and cool and weird, and that Jeff Bezos, I don't know, I should have just stuck to the first one, is
Bezos?
Yeah, potato. He's the next, he's the next Harvey Weinstein, or was it Weinstein, or or Lucas, and it's that is that the mainstreaming of streaming, right? Even just witnessing little things like when you fly and you use GoGo Internet, there's a big sign, a warning little sign saying HBO Go or these streaming platforms, Netflix, are not supported by GoGo. But guess what? GoGo now has its own little viewing app, and you can view movies on your mobile device on these flights, some of them for free and some of them at a fee, using their specific app. So I guess the bandwidth really is available after all, or they've just figured out a way to compress it. But we're just seeing this pervasiveness of streaming absolutely everywhere. And the industry is still struggling to figure out how to monetize, how to measure, how to track, how to optimize. But I mean, that ship has sailed, and it's crazy, and old people like myself are still, struggling to figure out what do you mean the entire series launches the same day, and I can view every single episode from the series, and binge view it, in one sitting, as opposed to waiting for 8 o'clock on a Monday to watch the next installment of The Bachelor, etc.
And for the early adopters, what's happening, like in my perspective, when I speak to friends who do this so sort of casually at this point, it's now the opposite where we're like, oh, who wants to sort of sit through like, months of waiting for the next episode, because the habitual behavior of having access on that binge capability is now been several years for a lot of people. If we're going to look at CES, I would say for sure mobile. I think workspace was a big deal. I think the privacy hacking and how people deal with their data, streaming like we just talked about, home automation, wearables, drones, vehicles, autonomous vehicles. And I think the last one we didn't talk about, which I'll just sort of mention, then let's skip into sort of areas that, they keep talking but nothing's happening, for me would have been audio. I think that this sort of connectivity, whether it's Bluetooth app enabled to your Sonos and Bose and play bars, and just the ability to have very good quality audio streaming in that capacity through Bluetooth was a big thing too. In the interest of time, Joe, let's talk a little. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to just also my kind of final point, and then we'll make sure that we spend the last 5 to 7 minutes on the other stuff. To me, just the CES and the Golden Globes being like literally within days apart, I've been amazed at the common thread, right? Because we talk about content and streaming and so on and so forth. But one thing that I also witnessed last night, the well-known ad critic, Barbara Lippert. Barbara Lippert is to Adweek what Bob Garfield is to or was to Ad Age. And Barbara kind of just went to Facebook and almost created the equivalent of that, tongue stuck out photo on Snapchat or whatever, and said, thread here for the Golden Globes. And there were at one point 600-700 comments on it. And she just created a space, and whoever followed her or was connected to her saw the stream, and that's where the conversation was taking place. And it was just an interesting reflection of the new water cooler happening in real time and happening on a social platform. And the reason I mention that is because we're always thinking about what's new and who's old and who's left behind. And I think amidst all of this, Google was there and Hulu was there and iHeartRadio was there and all the big parties were there, and so was Twitter. But I also think that this is an interesting year and will be an interesting year to see if Twitter will survive, or at least will be able to find its relevance. Because at the same time, the big announcement during CES was, Twitter, or at least I don't know if they actually made the announcement or if it was just the talk or the rumors that Twitter will expand to, I guess, 1,000 characters, in an effort to kind of move beyond this arbitrary 140. So I also think it's kind of interesting to see that on so many different levels, and sometimes meta and sometimes just parallel levels, we're seeing, is Twitter today's, or yesterday's or today's Kodak in a sense? Who knows? But certainly we're just seeing the ability to kind of the cycling between companies rising and falling is increasing, and then companies, the old stalwarts of CES, the Samsungs, the Panasonics, having to work really hard to maintain their dominance of the floor of the main stage versus being shunted or shafted by, who knows, Google replacing them in the next year, couple of years. So I just thought that's kind of how I wanted to just sum up my thoughts. But now I'll segue back to you to talk about just a little bit of, I guess, fun, which is some of the technologies that did not live up to their hype.
Yeah, so the first one for me is 3D printing. I feel like there was this sort of whole MakerBot component, and soon we're going to have, Home Depot will basically be like a walk-up kiosk where they'll just print whatever you need in the back. To this is going to be a much longer road. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, that these things are duds. I think that there are inevitable developments of technology. I just think they're going to take a lot longer than we're going to see it this year, and it's going to be consumer-facing, next week versus like some of the stuff we actually did see at CES that delivered on that. But for me, 3D printing is the one that I think it's a dark horse. It's going to take a while. We're going to get there. But I really am starting to feel like this technology is a lot more complex and complicated than a lot of us thought.
I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but what I would say in terms of, did I hear buzz and announcements? But it is a huge huge space. And so what I'll agree with is that,
It's just that this year it's not going to be commercialized, is what I mean.
yeah, but I mean the ability, the advancements, and I think really just like the kind of the virtual reality
That's
space.
my next one.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think what's interesting is to take these fringe technologies and figure out how to commercialize them. Maybe again focusing on the CE of CES, right? How to create an affordable, scalable and pervasive consumer, product. Because I will say again, at the same time, we saw a lot of not hype, but a lot of buzz around, Tesla's new Model 3, which will be $35,000. Now, I mean,
And the GM electric car too got tons of rave reviews as well.
But Tesla, in terms of now, same concept, right? The cheaper component, which is the common thread here. Again, we talk about various common threads, but one of them is always going to be Moore's law in effect, from the Intel processor, and the chip, to now, being able to see all of this stuff becoming mainstreamed and affordable for the masses, because that's when you see not just a tipping point, but that's when you see kind of, something moving from the fringe to the mainstream, for sure. So you were gonna go to VR.
Yeah, I think virtual reality for sure is the next one, where I am probably one of the largest advocates in the marketing space about how this is going to be the next platform. It is going to make the web browser look like a joke. It is going to make sort of the 2D dimensions of e-commerce and things we've seen to date look completely comical, that this is the sort of beginning of the holodeck and Star Trek and on and on and on. I just think it's going to take a lot longer. And if ever there was, to me, a real sort of point on that, at Google Zeitgeist, I talked about this. We talked about this, I think, in the last recording, that I saw a demo of a field trip to the Amazon rainforest that just made me really open up my eyes and realize this is the future. But again, here we are, Zuckerberg talking about it, the introduction of Oculus, Samsung VR. Oculus comes out and suddenly, you got to have a PC to operate it. It's a bit longer that's going to take us to get there. Device is $600 plus. I'm very, very bullish on virtual reality. I really, really am. I just don't think it's going to happen this exact moment, this exact year. It's going to take several more years for it to be in a place where consumers are going to go hee-haw over it. That's just my own opinion. I thought it might have been this moment with Oculus and CES. I didn't feel it.
Yeah, I mean, look, my commentary is that I think I'm very excited to see what that integration looks like into gaming consoles, and because that potentially just takes the whole experience to the next level. What I will say is, and I posted this on Facebook. Well, I mean, it was on Facebook. I didn't even post it. It was on Facebook. I still haven't figured out how or what it is or how it works. But a video, I think it was called VR 360, which is you see someone taken off in a plane, and you click on the video and you realize, and it says move your phone around. As you move your phone, the whole video moves as well.
And Facebook has that functionality. YouTube's had it for a while as well.
It is incredible. And you talk about vertical video. I mean, I literally turned my phone around, and I could see the pilot at the back filming what I was looking at in the front, and then I put my phone towards the sky, and I could see the sky, and that blew me away. And I thought to myself, you know what? Do I need to put on these but ugly goggles, or these I don't know, be Jeff Goldblum in The Fly? I don't know that it will. It's the same problem, by the way. It's the exact same problem of Google Glass, and it is the same problem of 3D TVs as well. The minute that you have to actually put a periphery or something physical and wear it on your face, I'm talking about from an eye standpoint, something falls apart, because unless it is built into glasses, which not everyone has, or contact lenses, which not everyone has, it is the one stumbling block, which I think proves your point. And I just, so it's just going to be interesting to see. And when I saw what I saw on Facebook using my mobile phone as this kind of VR peripheral, I was pretty happy with what I saw.
Last one is, I mean, again, you mentioned this, but this idea of 3D TV, I'm wondering if this is just going to be a feature that you'll get with virtual reality once it comes to fruition. There was tons of programming issues getting carriers to pick it up, on and on and on. I think the big struggle for TV is right now to get all the cable companies and everyone up to 4K standard, because that's going to help the industry quite a bit. But this idea of it, like sort of having like a TV or a 3D TV, I feel like that is DOA at this point.
And a lot of the hype around that was simply about, and I don't know whether there was any announcement about it, was that they would have TVs that emulated this 3D experience without having to wear glasses. And I think until we see that, same concept, right? Until we see that, we're gonna see these things as these big white elephants that are really there, if anything, just to have a point of view, to say, look, you don't like this, it's not for you, you can't afford it, that's fine. How about looking at some of our other products? So, the equivalent, it's the CES or the CE equivalent of a loss leader. Being able to get someone into the store on Black Friday in order to get them to buy other stuff. This is the thing that says, hey, come check out the Panasonic or the Samsung booth, and there's a big line to watch the 3D TV, but no one's even going to take the tear sheet, at least I don't think they will, to figure out how to put it into their home.
Really interesting to catch up on CES, and again, I think it's sort of opened up a bit of a Pandora's box into other areas that you and I will definitely discuss in 2016, as we do on our audio duels that we love to have. Joe, thanks so much for your time. Let people know where they can best connect to you.
They can, I can't tell them to contact me through Twitter after I've been bashing Twitter. Just Snapchat me. No, don't Snapchat me either. Just you find me if you're looking for me. And by the way, before we ask, we tell people how to find you, Mitch, because you're very hard to find.
If you're listening to this, you found me, is what I think.
This is episode number what?
36 of Across the Sound.
Of the big 6 pixels.
It will be in the 497 plus. I'm not sure.
Have you decided what you're doing for 500 yet? Because
I have. It's locked